And we also have from Guyana, Mr. Michael Monroe. So I'm not sure if he's on the call today, but those are the members of the task force. So let me now hand over to Avinash and Sandy. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Um, it's a pleasure to present a bit on national and regional occupational standards and PLAR, as well as the approval process for workforce assessment centers. Let me take time to thank you all for coming, for attending this webinar, to take time off from your schedule on a Friday. Um, what we are going to give you or do today is to basically give you a grounding on what we do at the Occupational Standards and Sector Support Department, which is develop national occupational standards. And we give you an idea of how we develop the occupational standards, specifically for the energy sector and the benefits of those standards. So Sandy is the sector development specialist who is responsible for the energy sector will present on national occupational standards and the benefits of these standards. I will then go into what is PLAR, give you an idea of basically how to conduct an assessment using a unit of competency from a national occupational standard in your company using one of the standards that we have. And then I will go through the approval process for companies or training providers who wish to be a workforce assessment center. I want to state from the onset, though, that to become a workforce assessment center, you actually have to build out a competency management assurance system. And that actually takes a lot of time and dedicated resources. And so sometimes it makes more sense to partner with a already approved um, workforce assessment center, like a NESC or a YTEP or MIC or who have you, or what have you, to assist companies in assessing their workers as competent. It actually saves a lot on cost, and it also saves a bit on the resources that you have to, the human resources that you have to expend in the workplace to do that assessment. That being said, um, if there are companies who are willing to go through the process, we will have we'll give you a snapshot of what is needed to go through that process leading towards approval. So I will now ask Sandy. It's a PowerPoint presentation that we have. So I'll ask Sandy to go through the first few slides on national occupational standards. And then I will rejoin you all to talk a bit about PLAR, do a basic, just probably go through a basic assessment or how a basic assessment is conducted, and then give you all the process for being approved as a workforce assessment center. Sandy?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Just going to share my screen. Okay. Right, so I'm hoping that everyone has seen my screen, right? Yeah. Okay, so welcome. Today, we will explore how occupational standards are developed through sector analysis, stakeholder consultations, and review to ensure they accurately reflect the knowledge, skills, and behaviors required in the workplace. So a bit about the NTA. The National Training Agency is a central coordinating agency for TVET, which is Technical Vocational Education and Training in Trinidad and Tobago. We've been in existence since January 1999, and the agency is under the Ministry of Tertiary Education and Skills Training. Okay. Our department is a core department of the NTA, which is the Occupational Standards and Sector Support Department. We develop national occupational standards in line with industry best practice. So what are national occupational standards? They define the knowledge, skills, and attitudes required for effective workplace performance. They specify what a person should know and do in order to carry out the functions of a particular job in the context of the work environment. Standards are the agreed minimum best practice
I want to see how the fit is.
in the occupational area and take into account all statutory requirements. They are benchmarked against standards including international standards, including those of the UK, Canada, Australia, etc. They are developed in collaboration with industry experts. The role of the industry. So we have the Energy Sector Advisory Committee. The NTA partners with industry and institution is critical in ensuring validity and reliability of occupational standards. There's an Energy Sector Advisory Committee that is made up of institution and industry representatives whose focus is on workforce development through education, training, and are defined by the products and services of the NTA. The Sector Advisory Committee promotes, reviews, and endorses the occupational standards for the sector. Our members include the Energy Chamber of Trinidad and Tobago, that's Dr. Driver and Ms. Rajak, Methanex Trinidad Limited, Mr. Theron Alexis, TOSL Engineering Limited, Mr. Ricardo Mahadeo, NESC Technical Institute, Kofi Tony, and we also have representatives from Massey Energy and Atlantic on our Energy Sector Advisory Committee. The role of the industry or the lead body. The lead body consists of persons with the requisite qualification and experience in the occupational area who voluntarily lend their service to review and amend the competencies or the functions for the occupation. Members would include managers, supervisors, team leads, and technicians. Companies that may have participated previously from the energy sector would include National Gas Company, Heritage Petroleum, Mustafa's Engineering, TOSL, Massey, Trinsulate, 2 Caribbean Limited, Procom, Proman, PLNL, BP, Shell, BHP, NESC, Demas, Kenson School of Production Technology, and this is just to name a few. As persons or representatives who would have assisted us in developing these standards. Here we're going to look at the framework that is utilized to develop these standards. We would start at level 1, which is your semi-skilled or your apprentice, your crafts, your level 2, which is your skilled worker, your technician supervisor at level 3, your graduate professional at 4, and your senior management level at 5. A brief explanation would include at level 1, we're looking at your apprentice or supervised worker. A worker at this level assists or works under direction or under a skilled person. Work activity ranges from simple routine tasks, working under mainly verbal instructions. A level 2 worker or a skilled worker performs non-routine and complex tasks with minimal supervision. Work is carried out independently in accordance with verbal or written instructions. At your level 3, we're looking at your skilled technical supervisory worker. They perform complex, non-routine task independently. Competence is displayed in a broad range of technical and professional activities. They work within a substantial degree of autonomy and includes responsibility for the work of others and the allocation of resources. At level 4, competence is displayed through the application of knowledge and a broad range of complex, technical, professional work activities performed in a wide variety of contexts. At level 5, when we're talking about our professional managerial level, competence at this level involves the application of a range of fundamental principles across a wide and often unpredictable variety of contexts. Tasks may include analysis, diagnosis, design, planning, execution, and evaluations of systems and their expertise. So this is this is what we utilize to develop our standards. Now we are going to look at the structure of an occupational standard and more specifically, the unit of competence. So the occupational area reflects the functional area being disaggregated for the sector. So a good example would be within the energy sector, there are subsectors. You have the upstream sector, the midstream sector, the downstream sector, and the energy services sector. This aggregating, we are going to look at this aggregating the energy services sector into occupational areas, which would include health and safety and the environment, process plant operations, welding and fabrication, mechanical maintenance, fabric maintenance, electrical installation and maintenance. The unit of competence or function, each unit of competence reflects the function or the duties of that occupational area. So I will show you all an example shortly. A unit title. This reflects the outcome of the unit. It describes the competency or skills to be achieved in terms of what the individual can do or perform. Then you have the element or the task. Determines what activities must be done to complete the duty. Then we have a list of performance criteria. This describes how the activity is to be completed and measures how well it should be done. The reinstatement is a list of parameters for which the candidate must demonstrate competence. The underpinning knowledge and skills ensures the candidate knows the underpinning principles behind the performance, and the evidence guide details the critical aspects of evidence necessary to deem a person competent. So an example we would have used here would be welding operations. So we are going to look at how it's built out. We have levels 1, levels 2, and level 3. Of course, we said that your level 1 would be your apprentice or your supervised worker. Here, what we would have developed would be the competencies for your level 1 person, which would include health and safety, maintain health and safety in the workplace, respond to hazards and emergencies. Of course, your person must be able to communicate in the workplace. And then you have your technical skills, which would include they must interpret simple drawings. They must be able to interpret simple drawings, prepare for welding activities, perform basic cutting and grinding operations, and perform fillet welds, sorry. At level 2, you would see here, we are now speaking about your A-class and B-class welders. Again, there's an element that speaks towards, a competency that speaks towards maintaining health and safety, of course, hazards and emergencies, communication again. And then we look at, and there's also preparing basic technical reports, right? So they have to do some sort of preparation of reports. And then you have your technical competencies in here, which would include for your A-class or B-class welder, cutting and grinding operations, cutting material using specific air, carbon cutting and gouging process, the different processes which they must know to weld through, which would include SMAW, GTAW, FCAW, and of course they must be able to perform a basic inspection of the welding activities. So these are the competencies we would have looked at in terms of your level 2 person. And then we are looking at your more technical person or your supervised officer in terms of welding. Again, there's health and safety, hazards and emergencies, and communication. I must note that the health and safety, hazards, and communication at your supervised level, of course, would be different, and it is reflected in the standards, his competencies and responsibilities. Again, the person at level 3, his technical competencies would include performing SMAW, GTAW, and the FCAW, using different types of materials. So the industry would have indicated to us when we were developing the standards that there are certain types of materials that only your skilled professional would utilize to do welding. I think the industry refers to them as exotic materials. As compared to your level 2 person or your level 1, they would use the regular materials. So all that is indicated in this standard. Of course, they must know to perform an inspection, and if they are doing the supervisory part of the activities or responsibilities, they would have to supervise a team, coordinate team activities, right, and of course, they would have to do advanced technical reports. Some of the standards developed for the energy sector, these are approved standards that are on our website, www.ntatt.org. I know these are some of the areas that would have been highlighted in this survey, right? So I wanted to point out to you guys that they are approved standards that are, of course, free for download and use by the companies. National Occupational Standards, drilling operations. We are in the process actually of reviewing the drilling operations. So if you all have personnel who might be interested with the, of course, with the requisite experience and knowledge and whatnot, who may be interested in reviewing these standards with the NTA, of course, you all can reach out to us. We'll be looking at starting that in January 2026. We have general maintenance quoting operations. The ones highlighted or bolded, these were the ones indicated in this survey, right? So we do have a health and safety and environment level 2 standard. We do have a lifting, rigging, and signaling level 2 standard, mechanical maintenance, instrumentation and controls. At the regional level, we have standards. Our welding standard is a regionally approved standard. Electrical maintenance and installation as well. We have forklift operations. I know we would have talked, they would have highlighted equipment, heavy equipment standards, right? So we have forklift operations. We do have, I think, excavator as well. We have an occupational health and safety industrial level 3 standard. We have a plant fitting level 2. We do have process plant operations level 2 as well. Inclusive of this, we do have standards on renewable energy. These were developed and endorsed. They were developed in Barbados, endorsed by professionals here in Trinidad, experts in Trinidad, and we have like photovoltaic installation levels 1, 2, and 3. There's a renewable energy technology services standard, as well as energy advisory. We also have available scaffolding levels 1, 2, and 3 available for use within the energy sector. The value of the NOS to stakeholders. So we would have done a little table here that indicates the value to individuals, to employers, and of course to training providers, right? So to the individual, it equips them with the right competencies, the knowledge, skills, and attitudes in the workplace or what the workplace requires. It is broad-based preparation for employment. It provides a framework for PLAR, provides enhanced employability, and of course, it would show you that pathway for progression. For the employers, it ensures recruitment of employees with the skills needed in the workplace. It is cost effective to utilize the NOS because they are free and accessible through the NTA. It supports identifying skills in current employees and reduce costs for training workers. So it identifies the gaps and the shortages, enable higher level of productivity, enables higher level, oh, sorry, we have that twice. Providers for education provides a basis for the development of instructional and training programs, establishes a industry-driven demand approach, and provides support for career guidance. If you would just allow me a minute, I took the liberty of actually presenting a standard to you guys, just to show you what a standard looks like and a unit of competence. So here we're looking at welding operations CVQ level 1. Right. We have the unit of competencies, like I stated before. Here we would have had the acknowledgement of the persons who would have sat and helped us develop the standards. Of course, you would see it's local industry
Hi,
persons from.
Sandy.
Hi.
I don't think that the standard came up. I'm still seeing the PowerPoint presentation.
Oh, I'm not sure how to get it back. Okay, so I have the PowerPoint presentation that's up. Did you see PLAR that came up?
Yeah, the PLAR came up.
Okay, let me just, and I'm just switching to the standard. Are you seeing it now?
No, we're not.
No?
They're
Okay,
saying,
so
they're saying please move this window away from the shared application. I'm not sure.
what that means. Okay, so, well, Avinash, let's move on to your presentation and let me see if I can come back to this.
All right, okay, cool.
All
That's
right.
okay.
Yeah, all right, thanks.
Hi, good morning again, everyone. What Sandy was trying to say in a nutshell, by presenting the occupational standard is that for every occupational area, and so and in the energy services sector, that may be welding and fabrication. What we do is that we develop all the functions for welding and fabrication, and we call those functions units of competencies. Right now, the units of competencies are then divided into what we call elements, or in HR terms or in the workplace term, tasks that need to be completed to ensure that the functional work is completed. And so every task is tied to a performance criteria. The performance criteria really indicates all the work activities that are needed to achieve that task, right? And so there are about 3 or 4 tasks for every function to be completed. There's something called the range statement, and the range statement gives you all the equipment that you need to know about, all the PPAs that you need to utilize, all the techniques you need to utilize, um, all the tools that you need to utilize. So that's the range. So it gives you a clear idea of what you need, what is the 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 environment that you're operating in terms of the equipment and tools and what have you. And then there's the underpinning skills and knowledge. It gives you how to go about it and why you have to go about it. All right. So that's in a nutshell what the unit of competency and the occupational standard is. In a sense, we develop it from level 1 to level 3. So we develop the functions that uh, identify what a semi-skilled or apprenticeship person should do, what the skilled person or the craftsman should do, or what the senior skilled person or with supervisory responsibilities do, or a technician. All right, so that's in a broad sense from a skills perspective, what we do at the NTA or the Occupational Standards Department. Each unit of competency is actually a very detailed breakdown of a function. And so when you look at, at an occupational standard at level 1, it is really a very detailed job spec. All right. So I just wanted to make the link between what a detailed job specification is as it relates to a national occupational standard at level 1, level 2, level 3. All right. So let's move on to PLAR. In a sense, once you have a HR department and you're into recruitment and selection for the workplace, or even if you're conducting a performance review, you are actually doing prior learning assessment. So if you're doing interviewing a person and you're utilizing a competency-based assessment model, it's really about prior learning that you're checking there. All right. So the prior learning speaks towards what a person would have known previously, whether it's through study, whether it's through life experiences, whether it's through other workplace experiences. The difference between the PLA and the R is the recognition. So the R speaks basically to how you recognize persons' prior learning experiences. All right. And we do that through PLAR assessment strategy. And the recognition of that PLAR leads either to a TTNVQ or a CVQ or unit awards based on a TTNVQ or a CVQ. All right. So in a sense, the PLAR that we sell at the NTA is tied to the award of a TTNVQ and a CVQ. All right. Because the NTA, as it relates to this particular function, is an awarding body for the TTNVQ and the CVQ. Now, once we go through the assessment of persons' prior learning, there's a detailed assessment strategy that we utilize, and it sometimes takes a bit. It's sometimes a bit lengthy because it's a three-stage model. Because first you have to assess, then you have to internally verify, and then we come in and do external verification. But let's move on to no, go back to the next slide, Sandy. The previous slide.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. All right. So when we look at prior learning, people sometimes come with a particular perspective that if you get a degree or if you get a craftsman certificate or if you have O levels and A levels, it makes you employable. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily the case. Education gives you a general gives you, in a sense, general knowledge. I want to use the word knowledge. And that knowledge is assessed through written exams and sometimes simulation. But it's general. The only time that you beginning to learn specific knowledge is when you actually have to do it in a particular context. And that sometimes takes place in a community, it takes place in the workplace, or it takes place at home. There is a particular perspective that 70% of a person's experiences, all right, usually as it relates to skills, come from on the job experiences, specifically on the job. So while you may come out with a master craftsman certificate or a degree in engineering or what have you still have to go to that specific workplace. You still have to understand processes. You still have to understand the particular type of machinery that's being utilized. You have to understand the PPEs. You have to understand the tools that are being utilized, the specific SOPs for the organization. And that's where the specific learnings takes place. All right. Now, in some instances, you have coaches and mentors to guide you. Some companies have that, right? Um, and so almost 90% of a person's learning experiences takes place outside of a classroom's perspective, outside of the classroom. And we have to understand and and create strategies to capture and recognize this basic 90% of learning that takes place. All right. And so that's what PLAR tries to capture. All right. And this really goes back to in a sense what the previous slide looks at. And when we look at learning, we look at formal, non-formal, and informal. Formal is what takes place at either higher education institution, a secondary school or primary school, or what takes place at a recognized training provider like NESC. Non-formal learning takes place in the workplace. It speaks towards um, apprenticeships, traineeships, mentorships. Even when you in a company brings in a new piece of equipment or a new piece of technology or introduces a new piece, a new SOP or process, all of that falls into the category of non-formal learning. Most of those things, especially the ones where there are introductions to new technology and processes and equipment and things, sometimes we don't capture and recognize that type of learning. Then you have the other type of learning, which is the informal learning, which actually takes place at the level of communities. You may be involved in community projects with NGOs and stuff like that. Some NGOs build houses, so you probably go and help construct some houses and stuff like that. So you develop some kind of construction skill sets, right? But that again is also not recognized because you're doing it informally. Um, go on to the next slide. All right. Um, now the basis for our assessment, all right, for PLAR is really the competency standard or the national occupational standard. And it's a process which focuses on identifying and assessing an individual's knowledge, skills, and attitudes, which we would have gained from work or training or what have you. That particular knowledge, skills, and attitudes is then aligned and assessed. That particular knowledge is actually assessed against each unit of competency in a national occupational standard. You could go ahead. Just to note some types of assessment we tend to look at when we look at assessment methods. And this is broad assessment methods for competency-based assessment. It does not necessarily speak directly to PLAR. So when a training provider is doing an assessment for a candidate to deem that that person is competent. They use a variety of methods which are depicted in this slide. So, and it could be things like product assessment. So, for example, if in say somebody is being trained in commercial food prep at YTEP, what they look at is the final product. They may be baking a cake or cooking a dish or whatever. And so you do a product assessment in terms of the quality and the texture and the taste and the smell and what have you. All right. So you have things like projects and assessments, case studies. Case studies tend to be more aligned to level 3 and level 4. But assignments, everybody gets work assignments, and everybody's work assignments has to be reviewed by a superior. All right. Essays, reports, diary logs. Essays sometimes don't necessarily occur in the workplace, but everybody has to do reports and logs and stuff like that. Written and oral assessments. Oral assessments sometimes takes place in the workplace because when you, as a supervisor, you go and you check out um, a piece of a job that somebody is doing, you probably ask questions. Similarly, you may have a written checklist, which is in a sense the written assessment. Playing is really about simulations, and sometimes this may happen in a workplace, sometimes it may not happen. Skills demonstration, performance assessments. Performance assessments happen daily in the workplace. As I said, for example, if you are interviewing to be a maintenance technician in a company, you have to go through an interview process. That interview process is based on a panel, and panel may ask you to do some presentations and stuff like that. Similarly, as it relates to PLAR, you may have to actually go through interviews, panel presentations, and oral presentations. One of the key aspects, though, for PLAR is a portfolio review or evidence collection. So really, when you're doing a PLAR for a workplace to ensure that that person skill set or competencies are recognized, that person actually has to build perform a portfolio of the work activities that have been completed, and then that portfolio is then aligned to units of competencies and a standard, and that's where the assessment takes place. All right. So what we are going to do is just do a little basic as how a basic assessment is done utilizing a unit of competency. And we would have looked at, so I pulled out mechanical maintenance. It's a level 2 um, classification here, meaning that the worker is a skilled worker and can work by himself using minimal supervision. This skilled worker should know um, how to conduct a conduct task independently. All right. So the one that we decided to look at is disassemble and repair mechanical equipment. And so when we're looking at disassembling and repairing mechanical equipment, we are looking at the skills, knowledge, and attitudes which are required to disassemble, inspect, repair, and reassemble a particular mechanical equipment. More importantly, it must be done safely. All right. So a key aspect of a lot of these standards is the health and safety aspect of the work activity involved. Right. Also important is that when you're doing a piece of work for a particular company, it must be based on the workplace specification, manufacturer specification, and sometimes the client's specification. So Sandy and I would have indicated and spoken a bit about the elements. So the elements for this particular unit of competency is prepare to disassemble equipment, perform disassembly and inspection of mechanical equipment, restore components, and complete work operations. So these are the basic 4 tasks required to be completed for this function to be completed, which is disassemble and repair mechanical equipment. And basically, the purpose of the assessment in a nutshell is to determine whether or not the candidate can competently complete this particular function. Right, go ahead, Sandy. All right, so it's not really learning outcomes, it's really the assessment outcomes. So that's as I seeing this slide now, I realized that there was a little faux pas on my part there. So it's really the assessment outcomes. So the first one is to work safely and comply with workplace and national safety standards. So once you're operating in a skilled environment, especially in the energy sector, the first outcome is always about working safely and complying with workplace and national safety standards. Right? The other assessment outcome is to how to determine how the candidate is going, or the worker is going to prepare, disassemble, inspect, repair, and reassemble the equipment. You're also going to assess if the candidate can select and utilize the appropriate tools, techniques, and documents. You're also going to assess whether or not the person can communicate well. All right, because in a company, no man is an island. Nobody works by himself. There is a chain of activities that take place to ensure that a work detail is completed. All right, and so their communication must be across from the start of the work detail right on to the end, and also there must be some type of reporting of the work activity or detail that's completed. Importantly, there sometimes we need to ensure that there's sound technical knowledge, because sometimes you see somebody doing something and they're doing it over and over, but sometimes they don't understand why they're doing it. So really, the why dictates the how and the what. So in a sense, you sometimes need, especially in technical areas, to ensure that people understand why they are doing a piece of work and why and the safety required. So the assessment plan. And so you notice we went through the um the the assessment, but what we try to do is to tie it to what actually happens in the workplace. So you see, the method is practical demonstration, and that's really direct observation and a workplace checklist in terms of getting the work done. And in this case, disassembly, inspection, repair, and reassembly. So really you have a checklist. All companies should have a checklist of how to go about doing this. And part of the assessment, you actually, the person actually is doing a practical demonstration while they're doing it. And you as the supervisor conduct an assessment. Sometimes while you're doing those things, you ask some oral questions, written questions, knowledge quiz, if you want to make it exciting. And so you as the assessor or your supervisor, you make notes about the level or the knowledge, um, the knowledge requirements and competency of your worker. And I think as a assessor, you must do that because you must understand the strengths and weaknesses of the persons that you work with. Sometimes one of the evidence that you need to capture is workplace documents. there are always workplace reports or job reports, and you do an assessment of your job reports, your maintenance records, and stuff like that. That's workplace documentation. All companies, once you are registered and you're doing work for clients, must have some form of quality assurance, competency quality assurance taking place, which speaks towards how you collect and manage your documentation. Third party report. A lot of companies do work for clients. And so sometimes you might want to capture what the client's assessment of the work done by your officers, sorry, your skilled persons, or as the case may be. So you can use that also. Peer review. Um, Sometimes as I said, no one person is an island. And so probably two or three persons work in a group to conduct that particular work activity or function. And then at the end of it, you have a discussion about what went well, what didn't go well, what needs to be improved. And that is also, in a sense, documented and utilized as evidence. All right, so this is just gives you a breakdown of what we just went through. Um, so it speaks towards real life environments. Sometimes you may want to do lectures, group work, and role play and stuff like that. You could go ahead. So in a sense, when you're doing a PLAR in the workplace, those are the structured assessments that you have to go through. Most of it is actually already done in the workplace. Once you have a proper governance and HR system, operational systems in place, you usually do those things in any case. So in more instances than not, companies already do some type of performance or prior learning assessments. The difference is that it is not, in a sense, recognized outside of the workplace in terms of a national or sectoral recognition of a worker's skill set. And that's where the Workforce Assessment Center comes in, right? That moves that assessment and recognition from just being non-formal towards a formal recognition sectorally and nationally by the issuance of certification. And in this case, it's the TTNVQ and the CVQ. Now, a number of companies have come to the NTA to, I guess, submit a proposal or application to be considered or approved as a workforce assessment center. The Workforce Assessment Center is really a facility or a service that the NTA provides where an organization can conduct assessments on particular competencies or competencies that they have been approved by the NTA to conduct. All right, and this is usually given out for specific occupational fields. So it might be welding, it might be mechanical maintenance. So you can only do those assessments for those specific areas that the NTA approves. Now, usually at the WAC, individuals go through assessment, and we would have gone through the assessment methodologies or evidence capture in the previous slide to in a sense evaluate the worker's skill, a worker's knowledge and abilities. Now, that's just the assessment. And I think I started off by saying that the assessment is really a three-level assessment. So you have the initial assessment conducted by an assessor, and an assessor has to be a certified assessor. Then that assessment has to be reviewed by an internal verifier who also has to be certified. Once that's completed, you then move towards the NTA. The company, sorry, or the organization after that internal verification process, then has to submit an achievement sheet indicating that these persons have been assessed and would have been deemed competent by the assessor and the organization. So that is detailed in an achievement sheet and submitted to the NTA. The NTA, as the awarding body, will then come and do an evaluation of the assessment system to determine whether the assessments were carried out accurately, they were done relevantly to the occupational standards, and is in line with best practice. Once that's completed, then the NTA issues the formal recognition through certification, which would either be a TTNVQ or a CVQ or units of award leading towards TTNVQ. The persons who would have received units awards, it means that then there is a skills gap between what you know and what you need to to obtain to receive the TTNVQ or CVQ. So there's a level of uh, counseling that needs to take place to guide that person in terms of how to achieve that TTNVQ or CVQ. All right. Now, in most instances, when you're doing a PLAR, there is some consideration for the formal certification that you utilize, but a lot of the emphasis is placed on the non-formal or workplace experiences that you would have gained throughout your work history. And so a lot of emphasis is placed on assisting the candidate in developing a portfolio. All right, Sandy? All right. So for companies who want to become a workforce assessment center, as I said, it's a detailed process. And so this is the process for approval. All right. This is only the process for approval. And so there's an application form to be filled out with a letter of intent. There's an orientation session carried out by I think our PLAR team to to provide an idea of what is the responsibility and functions of our workforce assessment center. If the client needs to move forward, he needs to submit a letter of engagement. And then so you now move from the PLAR unit to the quality assurance unit. And the quality assurance unit guides you through the criteria, right? And there are about 5 criteria that prospective workforce assessment center needs to meet to be approved. All right. So the quality assurance department goes through that. And based on that guideline, the prospective workforce assessment centers makes a submission. Once that submission is completed, an assigned quality assurance officer will go through your submission to determine whether or not there are basic gaps. If there are basic gaps, the officer may return the submission to you to indicate that these areas need to be strengthened or what have you. If it meets the basic threshold, then quality assurance audit is conducted on the prospective workforce assessment center to determine whether or not what is listed in the submission actually there's practical and official and formal evidence to capture based on what was submitted. If there is misalignment, then that submission is returned to ensure that it's aligned. Once it's aligned and the audit is successful, it's submitted to the NTA board for approval. So it takes some time. I would not lie to you, it's a lengthy process. All right. And I would go as far as say that sometimes we need to probably look at this and see how best we can make it more customer friendly. All right. Now, sorry, go back, Sandy. Once you are approved as a workforce assessment center, you are then formally recognized, and then you can go about conducting assessments utilizing the PLAR methodology. Now, once you are doing that assessments, as I said, you have your first assessment, which your assessor, a certified assessor, then you have your internal verification aspect taking place. Once that's completed, you submit your achievement sheet for external verification and claim for certification, which is TTNVQ, CVQ, or unit awards, whichever they may be. All right. The next slide, I think maybe the final slide. And so this is when the QA officer meets with the client. They go through the criteria document with the guidelines. And so the criteria document focuses on 5 criteria: legal and regulatory requirements. So you must be a company in good standing to apply, basically. So you would have needed to meet all the legal and regulatory requirements to conduct an operation. Most companies already have this. Sometimes we find that there are some companies who are lagging in some of the regulatory requirements. All right, but some of the legal requirements are already met once you have established as a limited liability company. Governance and administration. Now, governance and administration speaks directly towards how you're going to govern and how you're going to administer the Workforce Assessment Center. And you must show clear lines of delineation between the Workforce Assessment Center and sometimes the regular operations of the organization. Resource management. So you must be able to identify here your trained and certified assessors, your trained and certified IVs, and materials and tools and all kind of stuff like that to conduct the assessments for a particular occupational area. You must also be able to show how you are going to collect the evidence, all right, which is really the assessment and the internal validation aspect, right? So you must have documented systems in place, not only documented, but it must be operational for assessing and assuring candidates' competence. The last one speaks towards continuous improvement. So usually what occurs when an audit is conducted, not everybody meets all the requirements. So there is sometimes some list that is provided to the client to say, well, this needs to be improved. Similarly, when you go through an external verification exercise, there are some aspects or gaps that need to be overcome. And so the external verifier will sometimes identify that based on his assessment, his evaluation of the assessment system. All right. I think that's basically it, Sandy. Oh yeah, some of the companies that the NTA would have really worked with in terms of conducting PLAR. So you have Ministry of Youth, National Flour Mills, NEH International, TNTech, some work that we would have done with UE. Now, these are not companies who are workforce assessment centers. These are just companies who we would have done some work with in terms of providing some PLAR guidance. And what usually would have happened here is that because the NTA does not sometimes have the capability to conduct its assessments itself, it would have, as in the case of the Ministry of Youth and Sports, it would have contracted either NESC, YTEP, or MIC to do the assessments because they have systems already in place to do workforce assessments. So, in a nutshell, while companies do PLAR continuously, sometimes it's not recognized um, outside of the company, but because there's sometimes need for national or sectoral recognition of skills because people move from organization to organization, it's sometimes necessary to have those skills recognized. What I would recommend, because most companies are small and medium-sized in Trinidad, a small and medium-sized company in Trinidad is between 100 and 500 workers, right? And sometimes those companies do not sometimes have the necessary manpower, resources, capital to invest heavily on that. Sometimes it's better to partner with a competent training provider who's a workforce assessment center. In the case of the energy sector, the NESC is that designated player who and they do competency-based training and assessment for by and large the energy sector. So I think going forward, there are options available for companies. Your company can has all the resources that it feels that it can utilize to become a workforce assessment center, by all means go and come to the NTA and we will facilitate that. If by chance you feel that it may be more cost effective to utilize a NESC or a YTEP or whoever, and you still get the same benefit of that recognition for your workforce, then utilize that model also. But that would be a company specific decision. Thank you for your time. Um, um, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I will try to answer.
Hi, Avinash. How are you?
I'm fine, I'm fine. Hey.
This is Roland Babalov from Trinidad Tower Clubs. I don't know if you remember me.
Yeah. I know your role, and I know you and your dad.
Yeah. So
I think we met sometime last year or earlier this year.
early this year in the past 12 years, yeah.
All right.
So yeah, I'm glad that you're doing this for the Energy Chamber. Uh, uh, I've been advocating along with yourself and your group now to advocate the CVQs and TTMBQs and whatever it is for workforce development in Trinidad and Tobago, especially in the energy sector. Sometimes it's overlooked and sometimes it's not because of how do I say, the standards that are produced now for the operators or the service companies for them to comply with. And I think sometimes now, um, on our local or national level standards, sometimes it's overlooked. So I know me and you, we know each other for a long time. We've been advocating for it, but then sometimes when I reach the doors of some of these service providers, they may not understand that in terms of what we have available. And so, so I'm glad that you're doing this presentation, and the people that are involved here to make sure now that we're advocating on the standards that we have nationally, regionally, and so on and so forth. Because um, I think that a lot of the standards that we have now meet with international standards in many different facets. And there are providers that are here that can do it. I know like myself, we do a lot of heavy equipment and, inspections and training and so on and so forth, that meet with the standards. And so, and sometimes now we get caught up in the mix of, what some service providers are asking for. And then sometimes I think it's a little bit backwards because you guys are the recording body, or sorry, the accredited body that deals with skills trades, and there's many different facets now that require skills trades, and you guys are the governing body, and well, as I said, me. I don't know, the people in the chat may or may not know who we are, Trinidad Tower Cranes, but you know, we're one facet of an accredited institution that does, the accreditation for new persons and also the WAC, which Mr. Avinash was speaking to you about now, that we can certify and so on and so forth. So I'm really glad for this presentation. Thank you, Mr. Avinash.
Thanks, Roland. Good to see you again too.
Yeah, man. Now, coming across now, this is the second part of the question. Like I've put forward myself, well, as a company, to some of the entities now that understand that, like the BPs and the LGs and many different service providers. And so, but then sometimes now we're reaching a stumbling block there in terms of recognition. Now, we also, apart from our training school, we do work on supply of services, labor, equipment, and so, and then some of the providers that are part of the Energy Chamber TT, we get stuck at a stumbling block now in terms of the recognition, in terms of our accreditation nationally. And so, like, one of the things is rigging, or operations, and they look at some of the UK standards, and they look at international standards. And I think sometimes it's unfair because the cost of those things sometimes triple, quadruple, and then we have no choice because that's what the energy companies require. Something like OPTO and LEA, lifting equipment operations and these kind of things. So what I did as a company, with for some of those companies, make them realize that we have this, along with our partnership with you guys at the NTA, to understand this, but it's not across the board sometimes. And I think what happens is sometimes companies now have to do more than one certification for their people to work in different places for them to make the same dollar value. So I think that's something that needs to be, maybe streamlined. I don't know if we can have, and this is a good platform to get all these energy companies to come across now to recognize, our national accreditation, regionally as well, because they also work regionally, Guyana, etc. And so to make that happen, and I have no problem to be a part of that conversation. I've been advocating it for more than a decade, and let's see if we can work together.
Yeah. Thanks, Roland. One of the things that we recognize actually is that there are many international players in the energy sector. And one of the roles that the Energy Chamber and our sector advisory body um, tries to, one of the, I guess, the functions that we try to accomplish, and sometimes it's through these platforms like these, is to ensure that we provide knowledge to stakeholders about the local certification that we have here. I do know, for example, that Dr. Driver, every time he speaks about training and competency development for about the energy sector, both in Trinidad and regionally, always talks about the TTNVQ and CVQ. So it's something that I take your point, and we continue to strive towards ensuring that there is both sectoral and national and regional recognition for the TTNVQ and CVQ. So it's a work in progress, Roland.
Okay. Well, maybe we can get Dr. Driver and his team now, because of you know, the powers of the energy chamber, to get everybody at the round table to understand this, along with yourself and your group in quality and so on and so forth from the NTA to ensure this happens.
All
Because
right.
if we certify people, I have 100 people at my office come to your office yesterday. I have 120 people that are going to be certified on the CVQ for forklift, high truck, mobile crane, tower crane, working in banks. But now, and I would really, really dislike now the fact now if they go to somewhere now and they say that it's not recognized, you know. So I think it's a good platform that we're doing here. I'm glad that it's happening. Maybe it could be a further discussion now that they can bring all these same persons to the table. A lot of things that we got to talk about is workforce development. Apprenticeship is very big too now. Long ago we had Petrotrin and we had apprenticeship programs. So I think we need to revitalize that a little bit because we saw what this government is talking about, the revitalization program. And so a lot of the people now left Trinidad and Tobago through what happened in the past for the past decade for a better life. We lost a lot of skilled people now to go across in Guyana, different parts of the region, the Caribbean, and even migrate to North America, UK, and so on and so forth. So I think it's something that we all got to work on as a group of people. It's going to be a struggle. I'm doing as best as what I can on my part. I would really dislike that we have these persons now, all these persons that went through 6, 7, 8 months training, that went through the NTA to get their CVQs and so on and so forth to get stopped at a door. I have a graduation that's going to happen December 6th of this year. And I have the Ministry of Education and Tertiary Education, along with different ministerial staff that's going to come across here. And, they're pushing for work for people for tomorrow. Yeah. A big sector that I see now the Ministry of Energy is doing now is revitalization that part of Trinidad and Tobago, apart from civil construction, manufacturing, and so on and so forth. So we got to train for demands that are needed. Yeah. Unless at least in my part with heavy equipment and cranes and so on and so forth, rigging and so I hope to see it happens, man. Yeah.
Thanks, Roland. We hope that things work out also. We will continue to lobby for this recognition. I see Mr. Khan has his hand up. Mr. Khan,
Hi, good day, everyone.
good
First of
day.
all, fantastic presentation. I think once this already has momentum, it will have a positive effect on the industry, right? The industry is a place where there's no room for error when it comes to safety and quality, and this is an improvement step, right? So first of all, congrats on that. And to my question, some of the people who I work with, in terms of the trade, the welders, etc., when you talk to them, they will tell you very quietly that one of the reasons they never pursue certification was because they have issues with literacy. And how we find that out is when they come to do an orientation at our site, a safety orientation, they there's a written assessment, and they tell you, if I'm the assessor, they tell me that they can't write, if they could if I could call out the questions for them, and they will tell me what the answer is. And obviously they know the answers. They are very experienced, the people I'm talking about. So under I believe it was the category of flexible assessments, is there a way for such people where we can focus on the oral assessment and the practical assessment and minimize on the written assessment? Thanks.
So I will ask Kofi, because Kofi is really the expert in this area, because they are our workforce assessment center. I more often than not, oral assessments are utilized, but I don't want to speak out of turn. I'll let Kofi I'll leave the door open for Kofi to respond.
No problem, Avinash. Thanks. So the answer to that is a both yes and a no. Yes, in terms of when we do the assessments, we do have the oral questions, and we have also had instances where we've read out the questions for the persons. So that's part of the process that we use. Once we're able to measure the person's competence, skills, knowledge, and actual ability, no matter the format, we leave the door open for instances like this. I think the challenge comes when it looks at the industry, and there's another safety element in relation to persons coming into the space who are unable to read. So I think from an assessment perspective, it's not an issue. We can get it done in that way, but then it also then leans back to the operator or the contractor and the environment in which the person is operating. How the literacy level would affect the environment in which they operate? So I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, I guess what they're saying is you can do it in some situations and not all. Yeah, thanks very much.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, from a from a national perspective, Mr. Khan, I think once persons are who have literacy and numeracy challenges, I think we owe it as fellow men, fellow human beings, to see if we can encourage persons like that. And this, I'm speaking outside the realm of PLAR, to ensure that they become literate. Um, uh, uh, because life is becoming so complex now that you must have some basic writing, reading, and numerical skills to actually cope. And so one of the things, once we see this happening, we should recommend some level of counseling, some level of working with Alta. I think that's the best thing that we can do. And as I said, that this is beyond, um, this is aside from the realm of PLAR. Um, I've seen it too often where people who can't read and write, it affects their self-esteem so badly, and they sometimes become socially isolated. So it's something that we, as as human beings and fellow citizens, need to pick up. And I'm glad that you raised this. You pick up and deal with.
Yeah, I can tell you, well, I can talk about my little small world in Yara. The guys, the dwellers, etc., what I'm talking about, they don't have much writing to do other than really their name, right? Because they'll be listening in a pre-task briefing, they'll be listening during maybe a GSA or JHA discussion, and they will absorb exactly what's being said because they are knowledgeable in the industry. The So they don't have much writing to do, but then I'm not assessing them, right? That assessment is very different from what I'm talking about. So from on my site, you can get by without a high level of literacy, right? But yeah, no, that's in my small world. So yeah, if it is a way you could do it, well, then great. If you can't, well, hopefully you can find a way, like I said, counseling or teaching special needs. Maybe but that's outside PLA, right? So I wouldn't really pursue that discussion. Thanks.
Mr. Nigel, um, Sorry, my name is Roland from Trinidad Tower Cranes. Which company you work with?
Yeah, right, Trinidad.
Which one?
Yeah.
Yara. Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So I remember there were some people that we did with Yara itself. We had you guys have something like a pedestal crane that you guys offload some of the things that are happening. I think one of your operators came by our company, and so fortunately he was one of the smarter ones in terms of reading and writing, and so um you guys had a crane there and so on and forklifts and whatever it may be. But I agree with what you're saying. There's always going to be people in this stature of type of work in terms of skills that you're going to have to bridge the gap on, competency. Now, competency is a big word now, and it's a vast word because, it's not about reading and writing a lot of the times. Yes, there's part of it now, especially when you deal with equipment and equipment manufacturers on what they're asking you to do in terms of manufacturer specifications and so on how to operate the equipment. So, but I've seen in many situations, and again now we also own tower cranes and so and other mobile equipment. And many times I've seen persons that can't read and write properly now, and they know more than the engineer in terms of the equipment and lift plans and so on. So is a case, but they can't speak it. Now, when they come to those meetings that you just mentioned, they're going to get shy about it, because they're worried about, their literary skills and so on and so forth. But if you take them out of that situation and tell them to perform, they can do it better than anybody else. And sometimes now their terminology is a problem. Like a thing like rigging and slings, and so sometimes they call a certain sling a sausage sling, which is a endless round sling. And these are the problems you have, but they know how to identify and how to use it and so on and so forth. So I think sometimes now, yeah, the reading and writing is a humongous thing about it, and it's just going to get more technical and more technical and more technical because everything's becoming computerized. But in terms of the competency and their base now of operating equipment, they have it more than anybody else because they learn the hard way, the practical part. And I think that is a humongous problem in Trinidad and Tobago. Um, you know, uh, by extension, the CARICOM, because how much practical training do we have to give based on the training providers and so for them to be competent enough? And then I realize sometimes now, when they go to certain, institutions and so if you don't pass the reading part of it, well, you failed. So where's bridging the gap there? So I understand this as an institution myself and how to do the things in terms of the verbal, questioning and so on and so forth, what to ask them. Uh, you may know it too because you probably deal one-on-one with your people all the time. But then there's going to be a problem now that is it always the same now with every institution that goes across and them bridging that gap to make sure that they're competent or not? Yes and no. So I think there's going to be, my personal opinion, I think there's needs to be a big cooperation between industry, schools like myself that do the heavy equipment training. Mr. Kofi, I know Kofi very well. His school produces a lot of, people in the oil and gas sector, and I appreciate his school, NESC. We knew each other, and then the NTA now to bridge that gap. How do we bridge it to make sure there's equilibrium and make sure we have a competent person on the outside? I have a fair idea how to do it. I think we all gotta, work together how to do it now to make sure that that's going to happen across the board, not only for, my heavy equipment training for cranes, all skills, carpentry, piping, whatever it is, to make sure, because sometimes now a lot of people don't have enough money to go to these, you know, basic schools that we come from now, standard 1, 2, 3, and whatever it is, and they just go into the industry. How do you bridge that gap? How do you make sure they have it? And I think that's a big problem. And those are the real people that know how to deal with skills and so on and so forth. And maybe they can't speak like how, me and you speak, but they know it in a certain way. And I think that's something that we have to work on with industry, the bodies that we have in Trinidad and Tobago, and the schools that we have to bridge that gap. I think that's a big one.
Yeah, thanks, Roland. If I can just go on here, I was a bit. The thing is, if I let's talk about my brother again, who has difficulty reading and writing. If I tell them, well, go to a PLAR and see if you get certified, and maybe they can accommodate your challenges, right? Let's say he goes there and he fails. When he comes back to my site, I'm not going to get rid of him because he failed that, right? Because he already passed the eye test at my site, right? I work at a site where, just like many of your sites, there's something called diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as much as that is, you might hear that term and think about the rainbow flag. It's not only about that, right? It's also about differently able people, people with special needs. How do we include them in our industry? And we have people who we have, like that guy I just mentioned, who we have included in the industry. So it's not impossible to get them in, but it may be difficult to assess them, and that is where I was trying to go because I don't have the answer, right? I think I've been
I,
trying to like alter and these things, but yeah, that's a different part that we need to do. Thanks.
I agree with you, Mr. Khan, because look, I just did 50 persons that there's a government initiative that's happening now, right? And the same instance, we're Trinidadians. Yeah, I'm born Trinidadian, so I know I have an accent, but I've been living here for a long time. And we have the same attitude in terms of the people that we're dealing with skilled workers. They have a certain attitude, and what happens now, they get very discouraged very quickly, because of many different facets, emotional aspect, them being put in an environment of a classroom. They never grew up in a classroom environment, you know these certain standards. And we know that as on management, we need to do what we got to do because we wouldn't get our job. But at the end of the day, now we're stuck in a position now. We need to keep our staff and have our job and have production going and make money. That's what it comes down to. Now, I did the 50 persons here, and you can only imagine the kind of uh, backlift I got from them. Why are we doing this? Why is there skill ratings? Why you ask me all these questions for? Why are we doing all these tests? And so, and with the WAC now, it's a competency-based environment, and they're not here for very long. You know, they're here for like, let's say two days, 3 days. Why we sign up all the paper? Why you ask me all them questions? So, and all I can do now is, tell them, listen, this is the process, guys, and I'm showing them now what the end result is. And this is what you guys are going to get. You guys are going to get a CBQ. You guys can work all the way in the Caribbean. This is what I got to do. And the government's asking me this. So I always have to soften the approach now. And I do agree with you, Mr. Khan, is that you're going to get a lot of backlift from this now. The only way to get across of it, I do agree with the processes, some of the processes that they have with the NTA and what they're doing to do it because they're a quality assurance environment now. But how do I say, the workers are never going to understand that. You understand? And when you challenge their expertise now, they get a little aggressive. You know, they get aggressive now because you're asking them something they did for 20 years. You know, and then when you got to deal with that now, and they got to put it on paper, they get sometimes angry, they get nervous. They don't feel they're going to do it. Practically, they'll do it 1,000%. You can't stop them with that. Yeah. The written part of it, there's definitely a problem. And I noticed now myself as an institution now, I have to massage certain things now to make them comfortable in a classroom environment for me to make sure that I can meet with what the accreditation and certification is what's required. Many times now they couldn't read that, I had to now, do verbal assessments with them, and they did very well. but now sometimes they use a lot of slang and they use a lot of this now, but because we're in industry a lot now, we understand what they're trying to say. And I think this is again now this is a problem that's always going to happen. There's going to be people that are less needy that can't go to school and they go into a skilled environment now for them to be somebody. You know, where's bridging the gap? And I think that's the problem. Where are you bridging the gap? Where's that demonstration of skills testing? Where is that competency base on what it is? So sometimes the reading and writing is definitely a problem. But then what is the essential for them to read and write? So sometimes the standard asks for all of this, and then really we need this for them to be competent, yeah, in terms of a fraction of it. So I think maybe that's something that can happen in the future. Changing the standards, I don't need to tell Avinash about this. It's a process, but I think it needs to happen now. And as long as industry comes involved with the NTA, Mr. Avinash knows that as well, and I think he would accommodate it. I think we can probably bridge that gap to a certain extent. And there's only so much they can do for them to, you know, change that process without industry.
Thanks, Roland. Thanks very much.
Are there any more questions regarding the standards and the PLAR? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. All right. Let me thank the Energy Chamber and NESC Kofi and of course Sandy for organizing this webinar to bring some information and appreciation about standards and PLAR and workforce assessment centers. And I also want to thank the attendees for coming on board. I hope that you got sufficient information, and if not, please reach out to Kofi or to Sandy or the Energy Chamber if you need some further information or guidance. With that being said, it's coming close to lunchtime, so on a Friday, so I'm hoping to end the session now. I hope you all enjoy your Friday and your weekend. Take care, everyone.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Take care, guys.
Okay, thank you for attending.